Final report of the commercial starship Nostromo. Cargo and ship destroyed. With a little luck, the network will pick me up. This is Ripley. Last survivor of the Nostromo. Signing off.
What would it be like to survive Ridley Scott's Alien? Well, thanks to the devs over at Creative Assembly, we got to find out. As a general rule of thumb, games tend to have a more action-orientated slant, with combat being a key component, and this can come down to jumping on the head of a Goomba or blasting away a few hundred Nazis. It's all fun. Developers normally favour action as well, and tend to lean towards the iteration with S on the end, because blasting away a horde of Xenomorphs should mostly make for a pulse-pounding session.
Mostly.
Even the Alien 3 game basically became this, and it was nothing like the actual movie. But what about the first movie? You know, the one where the alien creature is hidden for most of the picture? Like the shark in Jaws. That should make for a great game, right? Though instead of running around with a pulse rifle, complete with pump-action grenade launcher, the daughter of Ripley gets a tracker, a wrench, and a fancy blowtorch. And also, unlike most of the games based on the franchise, the perspective would be in first person rather than third, even though this wasn't the case for much of the game's development, even if it was shown to the Sega higher-ups in first person. And after seeing this demo, they begrudgingly greenlit this survival horror, and at the time those Sonic heads were desperate for an Olympic game, of all things. Because sure, Sega had the license to Alien games, with 3 already in development, though one was having issues behind the scenes. Funnily enough, according to interviews, the game having issues wasn't actually Colonial Marines.
Sir, what happened in there? We shit the bed.
How do I get out of this chicken shit outfit?
So you just have to take a step back and look at the tightrope the people behind this horror masterclass had to walk. One game in development was cancelled, then Sega didn't even want to move forward with a new project, and they were pushing for that Olympics cash grab. And not only that, Creative Assembly had to constantly assure Sega and the players that what they were showing was legit, because thanks to the mess that was Colonial Marines by Gearbox, well, the appetite for more Xeno action had kind of soured. And too right, I actually never ended up playing that game for the longest time, and I'm a massive Alien and Predator mark.
That's just f***ing great, man! Now what the f*** are we supposed to do?
And just because development wasn't already tumultuous enough, Creative Assembly had to make the demo they would eventually show to Sega in secret, skunkworks style. This is risky business when you're trying to get something off the ground. Then just looking back at the old third-person footage, it's clear the shift to first-person was the way to go, with again the devs going behind Sega's back and playing with the camera. But thankfully the gamble paid off, and we got something terrifyingly brilliant. And all this came from a licensed game of all things. You know those games we used to get like literally all the time, and then they just evaporated one day? There used to be a time when licensed games were all the rage, and this was definitely the case for players growing up in the 90s and 2000s.
Return to your master, creatures of shadow!
It seemed like every damn movie had something to tie in, or basically retelling the plot with some added fat, which usually meant more action or platforming. Back in the 5th and 6th generation of consoles, video games were a lot simpler to make, and in a matter of speaking, had fewer moving parts. Yes, pixel art is harder to do, but when looking at most games today, it's not hard to see so much more goes into them, as well as manpower. They were cheaper to produce, and more of a surefire thing when it came to flogging them to the mass market, because back then it would be harder to find out if a game was bad or not. And even if games were more expensive back in the day, thanks to Nintendo and their cartridge cartel business, there were some bangers, like Return of the King and a bunch of 007 offerings, but they were few and far between when it came to games such as Donald Duck's Quack Attack or Monsters Inc. the game. Let's just say when I got my PS2, I was cursed with some stinkers for a while. Though that's not to say that licensed trash wasn't a problem before my time. Hell, E.T. almost destroyed the video game industry and caused the crash before Nintendo stepped in and saved it from the abyss. But at the sunset of the 7th generation and the dawn of the 8th, betting on a license just wasn't the way to go. Just replaying the plot from a movie didn't cut it anymore. You could only wonder what would happen to LucasArts if they weren't gobbled up by Disney, because that studio has basically 100% licenses. So as we all transitioned to the 8th generation, there were some licensed games, but they had to get a little bit more creative. There There was Shadow of Mordor with its exceptional Nemesis system. Mad Max went open world, but it just happened to drop in the same day as, well, a better open world game. Oh, and Telltale was doing their thing at the time, as they tried to turn every franchise into a choose-your-own-adventure simulator, and most of the time these were just interactive movies. And some of them were cool enough, especially the Walking Dead offerings, but even Telltale couldn't survive forever as their whole operation imploded. It was around the time that Shadow of Mordor dropped, however, that we got another entry into a little-known franchise that burst out of a chest and onto our screens. In the bloody 70s. That, frankly, as I've already mentioned, almost didn't even happen at all. What with 20th Century Fox and Sega losing their appetite for interactive Xenomorph romps. Cheers for that, Randy, but thankfully the devs over at Creative Assembly persisted with their production of Isolation. Coming from a studio that mainly focused on real-time strategy, Isolation blew most players away, and scared the absolute shit out of them too. Though if you look at the critic score at the time, something doesn't seem to sit right. What? A certain score from the biggest outlet back then has actually been referenced into hurting the sales for this game, which honestly fucking sucks. But 10 years on, Christ, has it really been that long? It seemed like all hope was lost when it came to a sequel. But just like how Weyland-Yutani always seemed to find one more perfect organism, we got a tweet from out of nowhere, announcing that Alien Isolation 2 was in fact actually happening. Nobody had that on their bingo card in 2024. But hey, I'll take it, even though I have a unique fear of the Xenomorph, and everything surrounding them, but I'll save that for later.
I'm afraid! Alright?
And this surprising announcement led to me wanting to cover this title sooner. I had other games planned first, but I just want to talk about Alien Isolation. And before my most recent playthrough, I hadn't touched this game since 2020, when I popped the platinum. I'm sure the hype for Alien Isolation 2 has died down somewhat, but screw it, I just had to revisit the Sevastopol, and damn has this game aged so well. Mostly. So once again, as a pseudo-retrospective type video, I'm going to fuse my passion of trophies, how's the platinum, and both the struggles and benefits that come along with being a player that hunts for 100% completion, diving into a game, learning it to such a level that anything and everything just come naturally, or in other cases, just managing to skate by the requirements to hear that satisfying pop. So I'm Ben Roy, and join me as I take a deep dive into this survival horror masterclass, Alien Isolation. The list consists of 42 bronze trophies, 5 silver trophies, and 5 gold trophies. So yeah, this list has a ton of bronze trophies, but that's not always a bad thing. And what might seem like quite a feat at first, is actually a well-crafted list. And you can tell some real time and effort went into this one, weaving the list throughout the narrative, with Isolation doing what every story-based game should do. Pop a bronze at the end of each chapter, or a mission. I'll even take it if they pop at significant story beats. But this is a must. End of. And there are quite a few other story-based trophies, but I won't go into them until I get to the story part of this video. Collecting items is a major part of Alien Isolation, whether that be ID tags, archive logs, or the Nostromo logs.
Ripley's asked me to log a report on what happened to the umbilicus when we hooked onto the refinery. I'll tell you what happened. Me and Brett were holding the place together with our bare hands.
These ramp up the need for exploration, as the player is encouraged to literally check every nook and cranny, every cupboard, every drawer, or under every desk. And there are honestly hundreds, maybe even 1,000 drawers in this game. And in doing so, scaredy cats like myself will more than likely enter 20 vents, earning the She's in Vent bronze. For players like me, this can be a nightmare, as you know once you abandon the mainline path. This will open up Amanda Ripley to all sorts of terror, and challenging players to get out of their comfort zone for a little while. Defeating androids and killing 10 humans is necessary for the eventual platinum. Which more than likely means Isolation is going to take more than a single playthrough, as a pacifist run is required, when it comes to the humans anyway, though apparently you can take them out non-lethally, but I never got this to work, and it actually ruined my non-kill run at first. Maybe it's just me, but the stun trophy threw me off. I used the stun button on a human, but that killed them. Isn't the whole point of this thing to stun them and not kill them?
Can't take much more of this.
And honestly, I barely remembered this anyway, as it was back in 2014 when I first played the game. Finding the baton and other weapons also helps complete this list, but just remember to use them all. Escaping combat from an android without taking any damage also earns another trophy, as well as killing one with only a maintenance jack. There's also one last trophy tied to the Working Joe, which requires the player to contact the team without being attacked by one. Just staying out of reach can be quite tense for a first playthrough, as Amanda is getting used to the fact that Working Joes aren't all that friendly, and what could have been a filler enemy for most games trying to pad out their length, as the Seeks and bots really mix up the experience of isolation, and have gone on to be in other Alien games too, and they'll get their own section in this video soon enough. For those players who never want to interact with the actual alien, well, they're gonna have to if they want the platinum.
Jesus!
As they'll be forced to frighten it away several times, with a Molotov and a life-saving flamethrower. And most players will need to construct a Molotov to throw in desperation. This also pops another trophy, if they haven't already constructed a medkit anyway. And of course, crafting all items rewards a bronze. And this being an Alien game, expect to die a lot. Though I feel like you've got to go out of your way to die 100 times to the alien. When I first beat this game on hard, it didn't kill me 100 times then, so you really have to work for it. And this was actually the last trophy I had to pop to get the platinum. Encountering the Xenomorph for the first time also earns the player the perfect organism trophy. Now anytime the hellish HR Geiger creation is skulking around is super tense, but the introduction to it really gets the heart rate going. Using the game's most essential tool to admire its purity 30 times will be an easy bronze to get. So will using Amanda's engineering skills to rewire 10 different points, then using your brain to perform 10 successful hacks also clears off another trophy from the list, as well as completing 10 successful minigames. Coming to the end of the list, a few trophies are tied to specific sections without dying, as well as the entire game, which I say for last, as my first run back in 2014 was focused on getting the hard trophy. I don't know, back then I had more balls than brains. After the destruction of an M-Class Lockhart hauler known as the Nostromo, 15 years went by with the incident in the vacuum of space, locked and sealed behind tape and full of mystery. The 7 crew members were never seen or heard of again, not even the resident cat Jonesy, though the company, which we come to learn is the sinister Weyland-Yutani Corporation, wasn't concerned with the lives of those on board at all, as they were deemed expendable, as the spacefaring corporation desired the organism found on LV-426. So sacrificing those on board was just another Tuesday for Wei Yu, even if Ellen Ripley promised to be back for her daughter's 11th birthday. This would never come to pass. Though before dying at the age of only 66, which if you think about it, would be a wildly young age to die in the year 2179, because a lot of people in the 2020s can live till at least 80. But yes, before dying at the age of only 66, Amanda Ripley didn't just get on with her life. Rewinding all the way back to the year 2137, this resourceful engineer was working away as normal when the lead she was looking for presented itself.
I'm Samuels. I work for the company. It's about your mother. We think we may have found her, Amanda.
In the form of a synthetic, Samuels, who informs Amanda Ripley the flight recorder for the Nostromo was recovered, after learning that said recorder is going to be reclaimed by Wei Yu.
What did it tell you?
We don't know.
Ripley, who I'll mostly be referring to her as now, as she is the star Ripley of this game, agrees to join Samuels and the crew of the Torrance to recover the recorder from a space station known as a Sevastopol. Not quite jumping at the opportunity, Ripley feels a pull to go with Samuels. Even if loneliness and apprehension can be seen in her face, there's always been a gap in her life, with her mother never returning. One that can never really be filled after a parent leaves far too early.
I've been cleared to offer you a place on the Torrance if you want to come along.
After waking up in what could be morning, but doesn't really make a difference in the outer reaches of space.
Taylor, good morning. Ripley, it's certainly not good, and I very much doubt it's morning either.
Ripley gets a reminder into what drives Wei Yu execs.
I'm surprised Weyland-Yutani felt the need to send legal at all.
The loss of the Nostromo and its cargo cost the company a lot of money. It's important we find out what happened. If I can close the case with a conclusive accident report, it'll look great with my superiors. I'm sorry. That was insensitive.
Though Taylor doesn't seem to have her soul totally sucked away by the corporation just yet, approaching Sevastopol, signs of damage are noticed immediately.
Sevastopol Station.
Is that damage?
It looks like damage.
Which prevents the Torrance from being able to dock at the station.
I can't bring the Torrens into that.
Communications are spotty at best, with the Marshal only being able to spit out a few bits of static before it goes down.
Colonial Marshal, Sebastopol State, serious situation.
So with that, a spacewalk is the only way to reach the station, but of course, this doesn't go to plan.
What happened here? My God, Ripley. You're doing good, Tim. Just keep moving!
Once separated, Ripley makes it through the airlock, and it's clear she was late to the party.
What the hell happened here?
The Sevastopol had been disappointing the Seegson company for a while now, but what Ripley was about to step into would amount to more than just a rundown station on the outer reaches of space. The situation on the station had gone to shit fast, even when Ripley finds signs of life, as they run off or stick together in smaller groups. After finding a maintenance jack, Ripley now has the means to proceed through the derelict station when someone decides to show themselves. A jumpy fella named Axel holds a revolver to Ripley.
I'm Ripley.
Where'd you come from? Ripley?
The man looks shaken up, and he's barely able to string a sentence together after he claims there's a killer on Sevastopol.
A killer? You get it?
Okay.
Ripley manages to persuade Axel to form a team.
What's in it for me?
A place on the ship.
Axel's a survivor, but Ripley can tell that he's not going to betray her. She's had to deal with some low lives over the years.
This is your lucky day.
Serving as the tutorial NPC, Ripley's going to have to follow him for a little while.
Hey, don't move.
Okay. We're not looking for trouble.
As Axel makes it clear how you're meant to play this game, and he's even got a neat little hiding spot, just like Newt would have in the future. Anyway, Axel lets Ripley and the player know, stay away from other humans.
Friends of yours?
I've had run-ins with those guys before. They don't like strangers, even nice guys like me.
I'm shocked.
I ain't pulling your chain, darling. You want to go and say hello? It's your funeral. Those guns aren't for show.
Nobody trusts anyone anymore. Unfortunately, after a little teamwork, this duo wasn't meant to be.
I hear something.
Axel?
Have I got on me?
As Axel is impaled by something and taken into a vent, never to be seen again. After a tense getaway, waiting for the tower link feels like an eternity as the looming dread begins to swell. Ripley can hear the creature off in the distance, and it's coming. Though before they get properly introduced, Ripley will have to make her way around or through some hostile humans.
Stay back! Over here!
Picking up a revolver and a hacking device on the way to the flight recorder, it turns out the storage on this one is corrupted.
No! God!
Then shutting down the current lockdown in facility control, the titular alien reveals itself. With only a desk between Ripley and the Xenomorph, the only option she and the player have is stealth. As the creature will destroy anyone still left alive. Not even her newfound revolver is going to help Ripley. Finding Samuel and Taylor is her best bet now. Coming across some working Joes, these androids are a bit more of a budget option in the galaxy.
Hello? My name's Ripley. Amanda Ripley. I need your help.
Please take a seat. Someone will be with you shortly.
No wonder Seegson is losing the tech race.
Seegson just can't hold up to the final works of Wei-Yu and their synthetics division, but while crawling through an air vent, it's clear these are more than just malfunctioning, as one working Joe kills a human in its path, going against the primary programming.
I'm warning you!
Tut. Let's resolve this amicably.
sneaking or running around Killer Joe's will have Ripley at Communications, where she can speak to Samuels for the first time in over an hour. Now on a mission to regroup with Samuels and Taylor, Ripley's primary objective still wasn't to escape the station, even with killer androids roaming about and an alien in the vents. The place had fallen into chaos, but Amanda wanted to find the working flight recorder, but she isn't heartless and agrees to take a detour via medical, so Taylor can get patched up and join them. Here is where Ripley finds a rarity on Sevastopol, a friendly human. Honestly, these are really rare in this game. But because this is a video game, her new friend Coleman has a side quest for her.
I need your help and you need mine. You find the passcode for the service elevator and then I'll come down to the hospital with you, okay?
And yes, it's got to be dealt with before Ripley can get back to her main objective. Finding the password required means delving deeper into the medical wing. And just because it can't be that simple, there's
one more thing.
Look, we'll need the physical keycard too. Morley always kept it on him. Find him.
Now on the hunt for the Doctor's keycard, Ripley's #1 fan decides to drop in to say hello. Finding Lingard's office before her keycard, Ripley gets a glimpse into how this all started.
I want that on record. God. That woman needed help. I didn't know what type of parasite she had encountered, but it had planted something inside her.
With the keycard now in hand, Ripley just needs to sneak by some humans and end this fetch quest by grabbing some meds for Taylor, but not before gaining access to reception first, which causes a bit of a racket to say the least. And just when Ripley thinks she's home and clear, in drops the Xeno once again, but this time with nowhere to hide. Thankfully, this place is going to The explosion not only startles the creature, but knocks Ripley out for a few moments, and now it's a race against time to climb out before she suffocates. Thanks to the help of a friendly neighborhood android, Ripley is able to grab a compression cylinder and get back to the others. Well, not before the Xenomorph goes all kamikaze on some humans first. Now back at Tower Link, the Marshal was waiting for Ripley. Unbeknownst to Ripley, she messed up the trap meant for the creature, so now it's time to get the transit system back online. After a game of Ring Around the Rosie, Ripley finds a cutting torch, which will make it easier to catch up with the others. Now at the Marshal's office, Ripley meets one of the crew that found the flight recorder, Marlowe. And does Marlowe have a tale to tell? He and his crew landed on LV-426. They found the same ship as the Nostromo did, 15 years prior. Entering the craft, they had no idea what they were in for.
A cockpit? And make this a ship? I think we found our payload.
Though back in the present, Marlowe isn't playing ball and refuses to hand over the codes to his ship, so now it's time for plan B. With a flamethrower in hand, the Marshal has a new plan to trap the Xenomorph and end this nightmare once and for all, before it ends them. However, once again, things don't go quite to plan, as in the server hub, the Xeno manages to escape, but Marshal Waits has a backup plan.
Take the elevator to Gemini Labs. If it follows, we can still trap it there.
There's a problem though. Waits was using Ripley as bait, as he tries to get rid of the creature at any cost.
I'm sorry, Ripley.
Genesis procedures underway. No! Don't do this to me!
After a nail-biting few minutes, Ripley flips the correct switches, puts on a spacesuit, and gets flung into the vacuum of space. Back on the Sevastopol, even though the plan worked, Ripley is pissed.
I got that thing. Jettisoned it into the gas giant. The station's safe.
There's that. And there's the fact that you're a heartless bastard. I'm heading back to the Bureau. We can discuss your methods there. Ripley out.
On the way back to the Bureau, Ricardo's glad to hear Ripley is still alive. However, he informs her that something's up with the androids.
Something's been up with the damn androids since I got here.
No, this is new. They've left their posts.
Great.
Bedlam ensues, as it seems Apollo has set the androids loose in the public area. Over the radio, Ripley hears that the Working Joes have in fact been sent out to kill.
Stand down! You bastards!
Returning back to the Bureau, only Ricardo remains, tasked with finding Samuels and attempting to get back control of the station. Ripley must first go through where the Joes start and end their journey. Escaping through a showroom full of the bastards, Ripley catches up with Samuels, but it seems he's already got a plan of his own.
That's too dangerous.
Yes, far too dangerous. Wish me luck.
Samuels, don't!
Before Ripley can get a word in, the plan goes ahead. On his attempts to reform Apollo, Ripley must follow Samuel's commands. Following his instructions, Ripley must turn on each fuse, even if the lights give out. Samuels overrides Apollo, but there's a cost.
Once you get into the core, it will talk to you.
You did that for me?
I wanted Amanda Ripley to have closure.
So now, all Ripley can do is head to the private transit and lift the lockdown. But of course, once in the core, Ripley must surrender her weapons, now leaving her practically defenseless. She needs to creep past tougher Joes that work down in the core. After jumping through the necessary hoops, Ripley finds out just who's running the show.
Two days after we left? You're kidding me.
Weyland-Yutani, because who else would it be? Unable to cancel the kill-on-site order for the androids, Ripley has no choice but to head to the reactor.
Weyland-Yutani are in control of Apollo now. It's refusing to lift the lockdown. It says there's something up with the reactor.
Inside the reactor, it's as if Ripley is stepping into another world.
I'm gonna have to explore the lower level.
Should be an elevator down somewhere.
Going deeper into the reactor, Ripley finds out why Apollo wouldn't play nice.
Ricardo, they're all here.
Where?
Everyone that's missing. Everyone. They're trapped in some kind of nest. There are eggs. It's like a farm.
The Xenomorph has a nest. This isn't alien isolation anymore. This is aliens isolation now. With her only option now being to push forward, Ripley gets in and out as quietly as possible.
Going dark on comms, Ricardo. This isn't good.
However, she gets introduced to the first evolutionary stage of her #1 fan. Yes, there are facehuggers in this game as well. Playing Ring Around the Rosie one more time, Ripley can finally purge the nest and destroy everything inside, along with the aliens. Or so she thought. Before Ripley can get back to Ricardo, the plan changes once again. Back to medical it is. Now in the Anisador, this is where Ripley gets the chance to find out what happened to her mother, and hopefully escape. Like the good engineer she is, Ripley reactivates the ship, only to be taunted by Marlowe.
Thanks for switching the power back on. You saved me a job.
Though he doesn't seem as sinister as you might think, something just doesn't sit right with Marlowe and how he's acting. After a cheeky facehugger tries it on, Ripley gets down to the reactor and finds the flight recorder.
Hi, Amanda. I'm recording this for you, my sweetheart, and I hope you get to hear it one day. There was an accident, sweetheart, and, we found an alien creature. It was very dangerous. And the only way we could stop it was to destroy the ship. We just couldn't risk bringing that thing home with us. I needed to protect you. Don't worry. Don't worry about me. I'm sure I'll see you very soon. I love you, sweetheart.
After hearing the final message from her mother, Ripley has no time to let it sink in, because now Marlowe wants to destroy the ship and the station. If you listen to what he says, he does have a point.
You heard what your mother did. She understood. If she was here, she'd be helping me. You think she would want company suits knowing the zip code of that creature? No one must know.
But Ripley doesn't want to die just yet. After Taylor steps in to stop Marlowe, the two have to work together to stop the overload. The Anisador won't go nuclear, but it's too late to save the ship. And Taylor. Now, all there's left to do is run. Back on the Sevastopol, Ripley and Ricardo have nothing left but to get to the Torrents. That is until Seeks and security arrives, which is going to make their escape attempt that bit more difficult. And on top of that, Ripley needs to head out for another spacewalk, all to get in touch with the Torrents.
Rip, hurry! All hell's gonna break loose when Sevastopol starts to fall.
After communications are made, it seems the leftover Xenos are getting a bit impatient, becoming more ruthless as they hunt whoever is left. Returning back to Ricardo, he is just another victim in a long line of innocent people on the Sevastopol.
Ricardo? Oh God. Ricardo. Oh no!
After finding a way to allow the Torrents to dock to the station, if only it was that easy. Waking up attached to a wall, all Ripley can see is eggs. Lots of them. With no time to spare, she has to get out of there now. That is unless she wants to get to know a facehugger a bit better. Back in a spacesuit, Ripley must manually unlock the Torrents from the Sevastopol. It is a slow, arduous process. Trying to not look in the corner of her viewfinder, it's evident that the Xenos are approaching. With everything set, it's now or never as she's surrounded. Undocking from Sevastopol, it begins to fall into the gas giant to become nothing more than stardust. Now on board, it's time to meet up with the crew, when it turns out they've got a hitchhiker, blasting both herself and one last Xenomorph into space. Oh God. Ripley is left adrift, alone, forever. Until... What Creative Assembly crafted comes quite close to the classification of masterpiece, especially in the world of survival horror. Then there's the massive trend of streaming scary games, which Alien Isolation seems to play into quite well.
Ripley, are you okay? Ripley? Not now.
It's almost tailor-made for it, because while this might be a methodically paced game, most of the time anyway, this game delivers on a fair few jump scares. Because if you put Alien Isolation next to all those first-person horror games at the time, it could almost blend in. But trust me, this is way more of a game than any of those sneaking sim-esque experiences. Because there's a laundry list of tasks and mechanics to play with here, rather than just getting from A to B without getting murdered. And sure, if you want to be totally redundant, then that is Alien Isolation as well. But I think you might get where I'm coming from. Thanks to Amanda Ripley's vocation, this means her skills are going to come into play more often than not, as there's a wide array of ways to get through the station. Crafting is a major part of Isolation also, and probably Ripley's #1 skill to get herself out of a shit situation. After finding blueprints throughout the runtime, she can then craft medkits, smoke bombs, noisemakers, and other handy gadgets that ease her escape or burn her pursuer into ash. The maintenance jack is a handy multi-purpose tool, because not only does it get doors open and help twist a few valves, but it also can crack some heads when needed. Just don't bother trying this on the Resident Stalker. And just taking a look at the current trends in gaming, if Alien Isolation came out now, you could see the devs implement a dodge or parry system, kind of what we see at the Callisto Protocol and the Silent Hill 2 remake. And man, if only Callisto got a second game, Striking Distance would have nailed that one for sure. But instead of Ripley being an agile master in one-on-one combat, playing as her feels like you stumble through almost every encounter. And this is really how it should be. Unlike James Sunderland, who at this point could probably take on Darth Maul, Amanda is slow and lumbering. Each movement or attack has a rookie slant to it, because she's fighting to survive. Not for sport after all. Taking on humans, you can hear her disdain for it, and the Joes are no joke. If the player only has the maintenance jack, they're better off running. That's if the Xenomorph isn't lurking about. Unlocking doors or cutting through panels also has a weighty feel to it, with just a hint of desperation. You are hardly ever safe in Alien Isolation, so getting through a panel or unlocking a door is a life or death task. This is what makes puzzles in Alien Isolation so challenging. They're quite basic on a surface level. Just watching someone trying to beat them might seem simple enough, but when you have the controller, this is a totally different kettle of black goo, as these are designed to slow the player down, just long enough to lead them to believe the Xenomorph might be around the corner. What at first look seems like a piece of cake, then turns into a hellish couple of seconds. And as the level of puzzle increases, you best hope a working Joe, or God forbid the Xenomorph, isn't close by. Alien Isolation ditches the concept of a safe room. Unlike the likes of Resident Evil or modern homages to the genre, the player is always raw dogging it here. These are some of the longest 3 seconds in any horror game. I can't help but turn my head and look around while saving. even if once you start saving, you're locked in. Isolation is also kind enough to throw up a hostile nearby message, but honestly, it always feels like there's something breathing down your neck in this game. And as far as I'm aware, this hasn't been attempted by any big game since. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong or I'm missing something, but I can't play everything. But yeah, Isolation gets hardcore when it comes to the saving mechanic. Not only is it tense, but this type of saving fits the retro future of the Alien franchise. And it was neat to see these pop up in Alien Romulus. Something like the Resident Evil 3 remake could have really benefited from this, just to spice things up. And whilst I'm on the subject of survival horror games, the ones that mostly feature in third person are those that don't really lean on jump scares all that much, in the mainstream to notable indie space anyway. And this was one direction that Isolation was going down, as I mentioned earlier in the video. But again, you could just look at that old footage, and it's clear that Isolation just wouldn't have clicked. Being in first person makes this more of an immersive experience, leaving the player to become Amanda. Which, yes, is the point of first person. Getting up close and personal with each task, the retro tech, and the infamous motion tracker. This makes for a really immersive runtime. And there I go again saying immersive, because yes, this game is so engrossing and immersive when you get into it. Just crawling through a vent with a motion tracker is all consuming, and none of this would work nearly as well in third person, as the camera's pulled back and the player isn't really in the thick of it. The camera just goes with the motions and it feels like you're in there getting your hands dirty.
It just turned itself off? No, somebody's here.
Check it out. Everyone with me.
Then there's the stealth aspect, which I do have to say, mixed with first person ramps up the horror factor, because stealth is great in third person, especially for games like Splinter Cell or Hitman, because this genre needs you to see over or around a corner, because in those games, Sam Fisher is the hunter keeping to the shadows, and Agent 47 is the ultimate chameleon, hiding in plain sight, setting up the perfect kill. Neither of these apply to Ripley. If the player doesn't want to die over and over again, then they'll rightly spend most of their time in Ripley's shoes, either under a desk or an event, praying that the coast will soon be clear. Or is that just me? Because running really isn't an option here. Normally Ripley will have the potential to stroll away from some humans that get just a little bit too twitchy, or the androids that just see red. Because if Amanda runs, you know who is going to drop in and introduce the player to their second mouth. Now I'm well aware that this is an analogy that gets overplayed to hell and back, but you can't tell me the Sevastopol isn't a character into itself. There are plenty of video essays and reviews that state this about any game, but I honestly think it's true when it comes to Isolation. And honestly, atmosphere is what the Alien franchise was built on, or at least a significant pillar of it. Say what you will about Prometheus and Alien Covenant, but those films had style to them, and were a visual feast for the eyes. Fassbender is also brilliant as David, but I can't go down that path right now. Just finish his story, please. We deserve it.
Watch me. I'll do the fingering.
Coming out just 2 years after Star Wars, Alien helped popularize the lived-in on-screen world. And by that, I mean one set in the future that isn't squeaky clean or idyllic. Sure, Star Wars is more of a fantasy world, but you could actually see the Alien franchise come to pass. You know what I mean? The gigantic corporation that post-merger that just needs to keep consuming more, and anything it can, all just to feed the beast. Even to the point of sending basically space truckers out for a valuable resource from the darkest reaches of space. This leaves the Sevastopol feeling like an oil rig out in the middle of the ocean, but in the case of Alien Isolation, they just happen to be suspended above a gas giant. Similar to the Nostromo, Sevastopol has seen better days, even before it is plunged into hell.
Oh, God.
Seegson just can't keep up with juggernauts like Weyland-Yutani, even when corners have been cut. Then you let loose a killer, as Axel puts it. A killer. You get it?
Okay.
And this hostile environment leaves the player feeling as if they're a rat in a cage. The team over at Creative Assembly went above and beyond to recreate the industrial future tech of Alien. CRT screens and a couple of drinking birds could have been enough for some. You know, to point at the screen, that's something to remember. But thanks to the unprecedented access given to them by 20th Century Fox, Creative Assembly had the original concept art, sounds, and well, anything that hadn't been lost to time. This helped cement the game in many fans' minds as a sequel within the sprawling franchise. The iconography is literally all over the station. Just take a look at the everyday signs, for example. These are all around in the Nostromo in the first film, but they blend in like any fire escape sign would in a contemporary setting now. It's touches like this that go a long way, and not many people would notice unless it's pointed out to them. All these tiny little touches and signs have their own meaning to them, and just goes to show how many man hours are put into crafting this world. Offices, hallways, and other locations around the station just flow so well together, without ever becoming jarring or filling out of place. Papers and other trinkets are scattered around an office, just feeling like someone left in a hurry, because we all know they did. Rather than all these environments feeling like a digital showroom. You know, like when someone puts on a shirt for the first time, and you can see that they just pulled it out of the packet. Assets have been reused throughout the station, but it's a blink and you'll miss it kind of situation. Again, using different lighting, or other tricks just to make it all feel a bit different. The clunky doors and 70s style computers lead to a unique future setting that for some reason Scott wanted to ditch for his prequels. Apparently the current day-ish fans wouldn't take to it, but then just look at Romulus and how well that did. That sure showed him. Logging into one of these old computers takes a few moments, and probably introduces a whole new generation into the fact that computers, didn't just instantly turn on or work. I know not all computers now work just like that, but you know what I mean, there's a whole boot up process here. And yeah, these computers were before my time, but working in a supermarket at one point, I actually had to use one of these computers, because just like banks, these companies don't want to upgrade their tech. The Sevastopol doesn't just look the part either, it sounds it. As so much was pulled from that original film. For anyone who isn't aware, once a studio is done with a production, they archive basically everything, on tapes, drives, reels or discs, locked away in vaults or in a mine until they're needed again. Yeah, mines. Some negatives are stored in disused mines, just in case they're ever needed again. This is why when you get a print of Alien on VHS, DVD and then 4K, they always look noticeably better, as the originals are filmed or captured onto stock that surpasses what most can play at home. So not only does that mean we get gorgeous 4K editions of the classics we love, but it also meant that the devs over at Creative Assembly could get their hands on them and plug them straight into the game. So instead of having to rip that iconic alarm sound from YouTube, they literally have the sound used from the Foley work in the film. As well as any other piece of audio used back then. Devs went as far as to use the Xenomorph sound in things like pipes, leading to players really needing to listen, as well as look when they try and survive. Meaning that the alien might not be on Ripley's tail, but it sure might sound like it, and lead to one or two frights. Little touches like this, which actually require so much effort, go a long way to again, making for one hell of a scramble through this nightmare space station. This is how to get a licensed game right. The station evolves with the story being told, what with it breaking down in new and unique ways. Each time Ripley has to pass through. This can cover up some of the heavy backtracking in the final act, because boy does Creative Assembly milk these locations for all they're worth. Because it is cool seeing degradation to areas once lit up and habitable, but the runtime is my major criticism with Alien Isolation. I wasn't sure where to slot this, so I'm just gonna do it here. As much as this game knocks it out of the park in terms of horror and paying tribute to the feeling and style of that first film, but man did someone need to cut this thing down. It feels like in the last third of the game there's always one more thing for Ripley to do, before she can get back to the primary objective. Now this does lead to some good stuff, like an alien nest, or finding out on Ripley's last log, but you can't get there anytime fast. Especially with this not being an action horror, it would be like Jill Valentine taking a moment out of her escape from Raccoon City to go and visit the charred remains of the Spencer Mansion. or something along those lines. I didn't feel this so much the first time around, as in 2014, I needed every hour I could squeeze out of a video game. Now as an adult 10 plus years out of university, with a little bit more disposable income and less time on my hands, Christ, Creative Assembly just don't want the player to leave the station they have expertly crafted. But I have to say, the environments don't look like they've aged all that much 10 years later. Though just take a look at some of the character models and well, they're not the titular Xenomorph, because some of these NPCs can barely manage to lip sync the dialogue.
Did you wake up early?
Well, I don't really need as much sleep as the rest of you.
Sure, this can come down to a clever use of lighting or other particle effects, but a decade later, Alien Isolation visually and mechanically holds up. As for the alien,
don't let the bed bugs bite.
Now I'm pretty sure I've mentioned this already. Xenomorphs freak me the f*** out. I watched the Alien films when I was far too young, and the horror around the Xenomorph has sat within me for years. And I don't think I'd ever really get over this fear, especially on the first go around of a new film or a new game. My heart rate peaked over 100 when I went to see Romulus in the cinema, and it isn't even that scary to be honest. So just imagine how someone like me feels when they have to avoid a Xenomorph in Alien Isolation, with little to no means of fighting back for well over 10 hours. It really is the perfect organism when it comes to pseudo-invincible stalker enemies anyway. Because sure, I love it when I get to mow down hundreds of these bastards, and shout out to Aliens Fireteam Elite. That got the feel just right. If Colonial Marines burnt you out on Aliens games, check out Fireteam Elite, especially as it's always on sale now. And if you're a fan of XCOM, then maybe check out Dark Descent, because again you get to mow down loads of aliens in that game, but there's more of a horror feel to it. Get into combat too often, and it's going to be game over for your Marines. Both games are totally different to Isolation, and well each other. They just share the world, and of course, Xenomorphs. They're well worth a look.
Absolutely badasses!
But unlike most, this title makes a singular enemy a massive threat for pretty much the entire runtime. What makes the Xenomorph work so well in Isolation is the unique yet not so complicated AI that the devs came up with for this overgrown bug. I say this because I couldn't code something like this, or anything like it myself, but the concept is a solid one. Essentially, the Xeno has two brains. One that knows where the player is at all times, and the other doesn't, or is at least trying to confuse that first brain. In a matter of speaking, they both wrestle for control over the creature, so the player can't get used to scripting in most levels. This makes for each playthrough being truly unique. But that isn't always necessarily a good thing, because yeah, sometimes an area can be drawn out for way too long, because the Xenomorph just won't leave, leaving the only options being, well, hide. So it's not always a perfect solution, but it does make for some unique scenarios. Then sometimes I just want the alien to either grab me or walk off, just pick one please. Then there are some times where it might not show its second mouth for almost half an hour, so it does go from one extreme to the other sometimes, but at least it makes this whole experience truly dynamic. When the balance is right anyway. Then there are a fair few ways to distract this stalker, with sounds, flares, or other humans. They're all solid options, but one thing the player must take into account is after a while, like a household pet, the Xenomorph will get bored of these things and eventually ignore them. Growing to learn the noisemaker is just that, and not another human ready to become a host.
Hey, is this one of ours?
And when talking about distractions, it must be mentioned how useful the motion tracker is, because this thing is a lifesaver. It's integral to the entire experience, but it can give the player away if they're not aware how to use it, because the Xenomorph can hear this thing beep if it gets too close. So when under a desk or in a cabinet, put this thing away when it's right in front of you, or get ready to load your last save. This is one of those features that I don't think many players actually know about, but it's a pretty neat one. I guess kind of like how on PlayStation you can have that thing listen to you and see you if you move about with the camera, but I don't play around with any of those gimmicks. It's a bit too much. The only real means of avoiding the Xenomorph once spotted is the flamethrower. As Marshall Waits puts it, it's an animal after all. And even though he's right, this isn't any old animal. The Xenomorph is far more clever than anyone gives it credit for. Regardless of timelines or convoluted cinematic history, just like in Aliens, the Xenomorph grows and learns how to deal with a situation. If the player becomes reliant on the flamethrower, the Xenomorph's going to eventually become less threatened by it, to the point where it can tank so much fuel, you'll run out in a pinch. Because you don't find much fuel, so you have to really pick your spots when to use the flamethrower. So once you run out, good job trying to cattle prod this nightmare. But at least the devs gave us one way to fend off the Xeno, which really sets this first-person horror game apart from the rest. A bit like what Resident Evil 7 would come to learn. You can have weapons, but yet still be vulnerable. Because once you hear it scream, or it run at you, you know you've only got seconds to put out that flamethrower, and without it, it's game over. And you can't talk about the Xenomorph in this game without going into that section, in the bloody reactor core. Now I hope nobody watching this has had this moment spoiled for them, because once you exit the elevator, it's all too clear what's about to go down. This is pure nightmare fuel, but honestly, a real highlight, even if the game's getting a little long in the tooth by this point. So far the players had to deal with this creature on, well, Amanda Ripley's terms, in an environment that they might recognise, or is at least human. But now, you step into the HR Geiger hell, and who knows what's in store. This is where it's revealed that yes, there's more than one Xenomorph. So after all the effort you went to flush that one into space, now there's a horde of them. Thankfully in game though, Creative Assembly only ever makes us deal with 2 of them. Down in the nest, it feels like there's so many more than that. This is where we also learn that yes, there are facehuggers in this game too. Great. Now up until now, I'd avoided being hugged by one of these bastards, but because I needed the footage, one of these pricks got me, and it's as horrible as you think. And almost 50 years on, they are still creepy as hell. I honestly hate them so much. Because what the hell is it anyway? And how could it be conjured up by the human mind? They're like little devil crabs with people hands and people fingernails, but they've also got long tails. It's kind of like a clawing vagina, but then there's a penis phallic thing that comes out. It just wants to impregnate you. It's nightmare fuel. It's just pure nightmare fuel, and I hate them. This is Geiger at his best, and at most worst.
Looks like love at first sight to me.
The other foil for Ripley as she tries to find her way through Sevastopol is the odd human and, mostly, the working Joes.
Biocontainment hazard level Omega.
Now in other Aliens games, fighting humans is always a bit lame. If I'm being honest, it turns these games into bland cover-based shooters, and it's not what you go to them for. You want to fight a Xenomorph, or well, hundreds of them. But in Alien Isolation, humans really mix things up, because the player knows the Xenomorph is about to jump out at any moment, so stumbling into a human or a working Joe can really mess up a stealth run, especially if a human starts firing their weapon. Most humans that the player will come across are hostile, but won't kill you on first sight, so this does make each encounter with humans a feel a bit, unique.
Someone you should fuck with. This is your last chance. Back off.
Good to see a friendly face.
So you never know what you're really gonna get when you come across a group of humans. It does make you feel like anything can happen.
Hey, look around out there. Anyone else see that?
Kind of like a micro post-apocalypse, as the station falls apart. Even though they might be a pain sometimes, they can be used to your advantage. Because as I mentioned earlier, you can sacrifice them and head on your way, though you'll just hear them screaming in terror as they all get slaughtered. This just isn't the case though when it comes to the Seeks and Android. Created for Alien Isolation, this corporation seamlessly fits into the franchise, feeling as if it's always been around.
How can I help you?
And for a majority of the runtime, keeps the game feeling fresh, rather than just another sinister plot by Wailing Yutani, even if the game does eventually kind of become that.
Right, then I'll have to find a way to talk to Apollo directly.
Biocontainment hazard level Omega. All permissions rescinded.
I don't have time for this.
You always know a working Joe. This isn't just a great tagline, it's reality. As a European competitor to Wii U, they just can't keep up in the tech race.
Weyland-Yutani synthetic registered. Attempted unauthorized access.
Meaning they have to resort to more of a budget option when it comes to their androids. The design of these droids looks like what people back in the 60s and 70s imagined the 2020s to be, though we aren't quite there just yet, even if Elon Musk is kinda desperate to get there first. The working Joe has such a distinctive look, sound and cadence. Joes are always a bit too polite when they pursue their victims, and at first, like the humans, I wasn't sure about their inclusion, as all I wanted was an alien game, no distractions, but they are the perfect middle ground between the humans and the Xenomorph. They are tough to take down, but they can eventually go down. And unfortunately for the player, the Xenomorph ignores them entirely, just showing how cheaply they were made, because we've seen Xenomorphs attack synthetics in other films, games, and probably books, so they can't even be used to distract the creature. And once mixed up with the Xenomorph, these sections can become a bit chaotic. And there is something about their simple, plastic design that just works in a horror setting, and frankly they work better not looking lifelike. It also meant Creative Assembly saved man hours not having to animate their face. This means they also don't emote, which stops them looking janky like a lot of the humans. And they give the game a reason to have firearms, because you don't really want to waste bullets on a human, and you need them to take down a working Joe. As melee attacks just won't cut it. Joes take more than their fair share of bullets to the face, which can also add to their threat level, as they casually walk over with bullet holes in their faces, leaking that weird milky substance. A bit like Michael Myers, just without the milk. Thankfully the shotgun makes short work of them, but this doesn't become available until well over halfway through the game. Though that being said, Amanda isn't an expert with firearms. If you just take a moment to look at how she holds these weapons, you can notice a bit of a shake to them, as if she's not quite that confident, which really she wouldn't be. She's just trying to survive. Again, it's the little touches like this that help this whole package work, and really helps build up the fear factor. And if the standard model of Joe wasn't bad enough, the hazard suit variety shakes up the gameplay towards the final act, especially when the player has to give up all their weapons, leaving the bolt gun to be the only way to dispatch these orange terrors. A simple design with a minor tweak, but it goes a long way. The Joes don't need to run, they don't need to be loud, they just never stop walking.
My turn now.
Unlike many games today, Alien Isolation still requires the player to beat the game on hard to get the platinum, and unlike say a Resident Evil or something like that, you don't get any extra weapons to help you get through this. There's no infinite rocket launcher, there's no coins to make you heal, you just have to get through the game on hard with the basic loadout, so it might be best playing the game on hard for the second time around, unlike me who just raw dogged it and played it on hard first time. Sure, I might have died a few more times, but I got over and done with, I guess. There are a few sections in this game that requires the player to not be spotted or die, which either requires three things: prior knowledge, planning ahead, or just sheer luck. But what's probably going to be the main roadblock for people trying to get this platinum is getting through the game in one shot. Beating isolation without dying can be a hard feat. That is unless you know a certain secret to the alien, which is once it grabs the player, the death animations take a few seconds to roll out, so you can just pause the game, quit, or reload a save and just be fine. But do you lose a bit of honor or credibility by using this tactic? Well, I don't think so. Sometimes you just need to do whatever it takes to get that platinum. But when it comes to humans, Joes, and facehuggers, death is a lot faster there, so there is a bit of danger to this run, and makes this the filter point for this platinum. Replaying Alien Isolation in 2024 has reminded me just how special this game is. And going back through the dev history, it's just crazy how many hoops the devs went through to get this game to market. From Randy and Gearbox screwing up Colonial Marines, to Sega wanting another Olympics game. And then Creative Assembly weren't known for first-person games in the first place. They were and kind of still are a strategy-focused studio. And those Total War games are cool, but this was just something very different from them. From making the demo in secret to changing the perspective without asking, the devs really pushed their luck on this one, and it paid off. And with the amount of love, care and attention they put into this, it just goes to show that we can get some good licensed games. No, screw that. This is better than good. This is brilliant. And honestly, one of the best games of 2014. And probably deserved Game of the Year over something like, you know, Dragon Age Inquisition. And thanks to Alien Isolation, we now have new layers to the Alien franchise. Amanda is more fleshed out, and Seegson has become a part of the lore, with them being in Alien's Fireteam Elite, as well as their work in Joe's. And as I mentioned earlier, many fans consider this a canon installment into the franchise. Not to take away from Aliens being the second entry,
Get away from her, you bitch!
but Alien Isolation is a nice little spot on the timeline, and with the announcement of the sequel coming, I can't wait to see what Creative Assembly do next. But for now, thanks to anyone who made it this far. Getting used to Alien Isolation again took a bit longer than I thought it would. Honestly, in the medical area, the Xenomorph kept fucking me up, and the game does have a fair few scares that still work. There's just a real atmosphere to it. As for the next video, the game's going to be a little bit more lighthearted, as I'll be splitting my way through time. But for now, if you want to help a lad out, why not throw me a like or a sub? I've been Ben Roy, and until the next video, no more games.